We have some video to play that highlights some of what I'm talking about. I preface this video by noting I am not showing you this video as some excuse for Mr. Trump's speech. This is not whataboutism. I am showing you this to make the point that all political speech must be protected.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country. Maybe there will be.
There needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
You got to be ready to throw a punch. You have to be ready to throw a punch.
Donald Trump, I think you need to go back and punch him in the face.
That I thought he should have punched him in the face.
Feel like punching him.
I'd like to take him behind the gym if I were in high school. If we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
No, I wish we were in high school. I could take him behind the gym.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
Take him out now.
Okay.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Please, get up in the face of some Congress people.
People will do what they do.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
We're going to go in there, we're going to impeach the
Well, this is just a warning to you Trumpers. Be careful. Walk lightly. And for those of you who are soldiers, make them pay.
If you had to be stuck in an elevator with either President Trump, Mike Pence, or Jeff Sessions, who would it be? Does one of us have to come out alive?
We have some video to play that highlights some of what I'm talking about. I preface this video by noting I am not showing you this video as some excuse for Mr. Trump's speech. This is not whataboutism. I am showing you this to make the point that all political speech.
All right, welcome back to Harley Jackson 50. Apparently there's another technical issue. It's not showing up on YouTube. So I don't know. I'm trying to get the hang of this stuff, but obviously first starting out, it's a little tough with all the technical stuff. And I still don't have a fancy intro done yet. But the one thing that I wanted to bring up is I want to start off by talking about the weaponization of words and what's brought on to this, right? So we've been watching stuff like this being talked about for several years, right? So this was back when Trump was president. And then, of course, since he's not been president, the rhetoric has continued. And what is really interesting to me is if you know me and you watch me on TikTok, you know I do not like picking sides, right? I don't like saying left or right, but that's how you identify things, right? Republican or Democrat. The Democrats literally are saying one thing but doing another, right? So the right is so dangerous, the right is so aggressive, but yet we just heard the rhetoric. I wanted to show the other video that I have, but I can't because it has the comedian Kathy something, I can't remember. She's holding the bloody head, and of course that would probably get me kicked off of YouTube, which it didn't work, so I should have went ahead and played it. And then the other thing that plays into a really big factor here, which I want to share a couple of screens with you, is I noticed something today when I was searching for day 2 of the congressional hearing, right? So I'm going to show you the 2 different examples of that. Let me share my screen here. So if you're looking at this one right here, you'll see that it says day 2 congressional hearing on Trump assassination, right? So this is Google that I use. I know it has DuckDuckGo there, but it's Google was the search engine that I used. And if you look up what shows up, it is J6 committee. It is Trump impeachment hearings, Trump trial, stunning turn. So if you look at 99% of this, all this is doing is trying to trash him and about his past, right? But if you go to and just bear with me real quick, and then when I went to bear with me. Remember, I'm still trying to work out the kinks and doing all this right. So if I look at the other one, I'm going to look at this one. Now, this was a different search engine, which was specifically DuckDuckGo, right? And you will notice that every single search is about the hearing committee that's going on about the assassination, right? So two different search engines, two very clearly different agendas, right? And the thing that I want to mention most about that is that we're talking about, of course, you have Google, which is about 91% of the population all uses Google, and that's globally. So if you wanted to paint a picture and you control the search engine based on what people saw, then you could definitely work into people's mind about that. So I'm going to go into the hearing. What I'm going to do really is just talk about the hearing, right? And I'm going to tell you some key points that I took away from it and what my thoughts are on it. These are 4 to 5 hours long, so obviously I'm trying to condense that and give you just the highlights of what I think. In the opening statement, it's Colonel Paris of the state police, right? Pennsylvania State Police. He said that the state and local police work under the Secret Service in these situations. He said that the Secret Service is ultimately responsible at events like these. Critical failures, and they need to learn from these mistakes. This really doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and this actually came out later in the deal that we're talking about things that I wouldn't even expect a rookie to make that mistake, right? So, well, I'll get into covering that, but it doesn't make sense how they're sitting up here saying, "Oh, we need to learn from this." I mean, this is a man with 40 years on the job who was surrounded by 4 different police departments and local state departments. Also, the Secret Service, whose only job is to keep somebody alive, protect dignitaries, right? So, to learn from something, when we start breaking this down, it's very, very simple, and it does not make sense why they're talking about they need to learn from it. One of the things that they did bring up was the FTC and the critical communications that are needed. And I know you've been hearing about the 911 center calls, 911 centers going down, the call centers going down. They are trying to push in something, and I'm going to cover that more than likely on my next episode. It just depends on how much more comes out from this hearing. But either the next episode or the one after, I'm going to do a piece on who JD Vance is. And this is going to be interesting for you to watch. One of the factors in there is NG 911, which is next generation 911, which in reality is just a police state where they can monitor things. And I'll get into that later. But it has to do with Peter Thiel, who is tied to JD Vance, who is tied to Trump's campaign. And I'll talk about how that all ties in together. Again, that'll be the next episode or the one after that. So he said there was not a change in the security plan, being that the state and local police, however, the Secret Service never met with the local and state police that morning during the briefing to make sure everybody completely understood everything they were supposed to. I think that's very interesting. It would be like, being the boss at work and you got this huge thing coming up and you've been telling people in different departments, hey, you get your part ready and you get your part ready. And then we're going to come together on Monday morning and we're going to put it all together. Right. And then you don't show up Monday. That makes 0 sense. Right. So I'm going to pull up a picture of the roof here. Bear with me. Okay, So one of the things, so this the number two, the building right next to it to the right, you can see there's a second story there. There's some windows. So what they're saying is that these snipers that were in that was in this window, it was a team of two. They noticed Crooks on the ground. They radioed it in as a suspicious person because he had a rangefinder, which obviously blows me away how they're saying that he went from suspicious to, like a suspect, like they need to get a hold of him. But at first he wasn't, even though he was walking around with a rangefinder at a presidential campaign run. Like that to me is just the most mind-blowing part of it. But they notice him, and then what they decide to do is leave that building, go downstairs, and start trying to find him around that perimeter. Now, their whole deal is saying that people were walking back and forth. There was a lot of people on the grounds. So they were trying to locate him. One of the things that I really, really, truly question about this is the fact that, I've never been a sniper. I can't say that. But being, in military, knowing snipers, all that kind of stuff, right? I've listened to some of these stories. These guys go on training exercises that will absolutely just blow your mind. I mean, these guys are, or on missions, whatever they decide to tell you about. But, I've heard a story of a guy one time was in a mission in the mountains in Afghanistan and went from point A to point B to take out a target, which was approximately 2 miles, maybe a mile and a half in the rough mountain terrain. It took him 2.5 weeks to make that 1.5 mile crawl to be undetected. He encountered snakes, ant bite, all kinds of stuff the whole time. And they have to be able to take that and just deal with it and just keep going. So we're talking about, I keep hearing in this hearing that, oh, well, it was a hot day. Is that why they decided to be in the building? Who gave them permission to be in the building? Who told them to be in the building? Why weren't they on the building? Oh, I know it was a hot day, but I'm thinking, isn't every sniper in the world listening to this just their head's about to explode? Like, what in the world are they talking about? So one of the senators, and I will give much more credit to the second day versus the first day. One of the senators came out next and he said, look, I've never worked in law enforcement. I'm not claiming to be able to do your job. And he said, but because a group of them visited before this hearing, and he said, walking out there, I immediately knew that building was the number one threat because it was a little over a football field with a direct line of sight to the stage, right? Because when they got out there, the stage was still there. Excuse me, things were still there, right? So that was the thing. He said the first thing he noticed was that building. Then the second, as he scanned right, was the water tower, which was 160 yards from the building. So obviously, if they would have had a sniper team in that tower, they would have had a direct line of sight on Crooks, and he would have never got that shot off, right? So when I say it, and I'm going to say this, another senator said he stood on the roof because I know they all have names, but when I was watching it today, the headline, they cover up all their names, so you can't even see their names. Another senator said he stood in front of the roof, and it was the greatest threat without a doubt from the 100 yards away, right? And then Colonel Paris said for the representative of Butler ESU, right, may have had a rep in the command center, but at what point and for how long he could not verify. So what happened was they had all the radios siloed, right? So the local police department were on a channel, the state police department were on a channel, the Secret Service was on a channel. And this isn't necessarily rare, right? And then, fire department and ambulance was on a channel. And then there was a command center. And in that command center, you have a representative for everybody on the team, right? So for each department. And this is where it got really weird. The Secret Service was not in the same command center as Butler ESU. This is not adding up in any way, shape, right? Okay, so they don't have a rep in there. And then he says, well, there was a rep at one point. I just can't tell you when, and I don't know for how long. So the guy that's in charge of they said there was little less than 40 snipers. So let's just go with 38. So there were 2 teams of 19. So the person that was in charge of 19 sniper teams didn't have a representative glued to a Secret Services agent's side the entire time inside the command center. He popped in and out. He was there, but nobody knows when. Absolutely. I mean, I'm watching this. And what's really getting me is when we're being given these answers, a lot of these senators are just going, okay, and moving to the next question. That to me would make that should make everything stop. The room just stop spinning, right? And it's like, what do you mean that you had a person in charge of the sniper teams that you don't know when exactly he was or for how long inside the command center? And why would there be 2 separate command centers in one event, right? Again, that does not make any sense. Yeah, that just really doesn't make any sense. So there were 3 additional law enforcement agencies out there besides Butler ESU, the state police, and the Secret Service. So there's a lot going on. You get a lot of people pushing buttons on comms they said they had 100 people there that day that overheated. They had a couple, emergency situations. So obviously everybody can't be on the same channel. So that makes sense. But them not being in the same building, them not being glued together the entire time of the event, that makes absolutely 0 sense to me. So the senator then asks, why weren't they outside on the roof? That is a question that only has been answered by Chettle, and her response was, of course, as we know, the famous roof was too steep. We're still not getting an answer as to who told them that they could go inside that building. I find that very interesting that 10 or 11 days after this happened, we continue to have people sit up there and tell us that they don't have this information. They haven't gotten the final report yet. They don't know. If you're coming to brief Congress or this special Congress team about what's going on, then you can't show up without knowing all this stuff, right? Again, it makes no sense, right? Again, in 2023, the U.S. Capitol Police investigated more than 8,000 cases of direct threats to members of Congress. That's 10 times more than 2015. So why is that, right? Well, that's because of the rhetoric that we saw that I was playing when you first came on. What's interesting to me is we even have the celebrities that join in. We have, obviously, the media joins in. They put it in movies. They put it in TV shows. They put it everywhere. And as I showed you a minute ago, even in your web searches, right? So if I put in day 2 of the assassination hearing, I should not get anything about Trump's impeachment trials and his all these trials that he got put on. That shouldn't even be coming up. That makes 0 sense that would even pop up in the web search. But it's done as a conditioning, right? It's done to make people think one way. I'm sure you know by now, Cheadle resigned. Interestingly enough, she is resigning with a $50,000 a year pension, which I know it's not enough money, but it's more than most people make these days. And then secondly, on top of that, she's going to go out and land some bigwig job like she had before from 2019 to 2022 with Pepsi, making 200, 300 grand a year with, I'm sure, tons of nice perks, right? So that is her penalty. That is her punishment for one of the biggest failures since JFK, as she put it, right? As she put it. Let's see. Of course, Senator Thompson had to defend his bill, right? So he's the one that put the bill out saying that if Trump, or sorry, if anybody, a member, past member, president, or whatever, gets charged with a felony, then they lose their Secret Service detail, right? Now, the reason he had to defend it is he wanted to make sure it was clear that everybody understood that they didn't lose it unless they had been convicted and sentenced as a felon, right? So they wouldn't lose that detail until they are sentenced. That's when they would lose that detail. And he wanted to clarify that had absolutely nothing at all to do with Trump. It had nothing to do with the fact that Trump was on all these all these trials right now. But bottom line is that's what he wanted to bring out and to defend. I think common sense would tell you that that's absolutely BS. There's no way that's what's really happening, because Trump was on trial in 5 different places, and they were just praying that he was going to get a felony in one of them, right? But that's how naive they think that the general public is, and quite frankly, we have been naive to a lot of this stuff for a long time. We are finally just starting to read between the lines, right? I don't know how people do long shows or podcasts without taking drinks of water, right? All right, so Paris said that from the moment the shots were fired at 1811, that he believes that the officer that was lifted up and peeked over the roof line of the building that saw Crooks, who pointed the weapon at him, was 2.5 to 3 minutes prior to the shots ringing out. Okay, now I had a comment to make about, but I'm going to hold that. Well, I'll just say now, because what he comes back later and cleans up that statement. He was informed because, again, Colonel the colonel was not there and not present that day. Colonel Paris was not. So the guy testifying wasn't even there, right? So that kind of makes you start to wonder, is that how they get away with all the I don't knows, I don't have a final report, I don't have the information on me, right? Because the guy that comes to represent the whole entire situation was not even there. Like I said, he comes back later to clean that up and to say that it was a few seconds. So interestingly enough, right? So during the whole entire time, from the very beginning, whenever that might be, I don't know what they would consider the beginning, when people started showing up, whatever time the gates opened, whatever that might be. There were only 4 people that were considered suspicious. Now, what's really interesting is towards the end of this hearing today, is he starts talking about. So at first he tells that, and then an hour later, when he's getting more questioning, again he comes back to correct himself, and he wanted to make dang sure everybody understood that, ironically, when they started looking for Crooks and he became a suspect, right? They needed to get a hold of him. At the same time, 2 out of the other 3 suspicious people happened to be very close to the vicinity of where Crooks was. So it was all happening simultaneously. Now, that didn't come out until about 4.5 hours, 4 hours and 20 minutes into this hearing, right? So it's interesting, after these breaks, we need to clean up some comments that we originally had come in and stated, which we are not holding ourselves, to the ground with, because they don't have an official after action report, right? So just, when you're hearing this stuff, you start to think something might be going in the right direction, and then they throw something like this out, right? So there's 30 state police officers that were in charge of the perimeter area. And basically what you're telling me is that if you have 4 people labeled suspicious the entire time, and let's just go with their cleanup story, that all 3 of them were happening at one time. 'And this was, This was 62 minutes before the shots rang out. They labeled him as suspicious. At 25 minutes with a rangefinder before the shots rang out is when they said, hey, we need to really find this guy and figure out. You mean to tell me with 30 cops, with 3 suspicious people they needed to go look at, that's like 10 police apiece in a confined area, right? But see, the thing that's not adding up is they said they were in charge of the perimeter, which would have been around the inside, right? Around the stage and around the the back of the stage, around the sides, and then around the crowd. This was happening in the building. Let me pull it back up. This was happening in this building back here. So the perimeter was all this stuff around here, right? All back here, all across here. And then all this stuff was taking place up here at the top. Now, something I want you to notice is now allegedly when these shots rang out, these snipers that were in this window were no longer there. They were on the ground searching, which is, again, just blows my mind that so let's just go with the fact that a sniper or his spotter would leave a position, which I just cannot grasp that concept. And I would love if anybody's actually done this for a living to validate that, because you would leave the asset, which was the former president and possibly future president and candidate frontrunner. With both of them leaving, they left that side of him unprotected. The asset was unprotected. And the number one rule of a sniper or the Secret Service or anybody for that is asset protection. So it is just blowing my mind that we're being told that they abandoned their number one core responsibility, right? So if you look at these red lines, they're not perfect. I just drew them with my finger. So to the right is where Crooks was. So you can see those shots coming straight down, straight across and into the stands. But what is interesting is if you probably did this with a ruler and a little bit better fancy technology, you could draw a line from that window and you can see that the machine that was there that has all the hydraulic fluid on the ground is gone, right? There was a big, heavy piece of equipment here. I can't remember if it was a crane or what it was, but it had a hydraulic line that got hot. That's why, or got hit. That's why all this ground is wet looking because of the hydraulic fluid. Isn't it interesting that line of sight lines up just in line with where that piece of equipment. Now, again, and it goes right across the stage. Again, I'm not saying it happened out of that window, but it definitely raises suspicion. Of course, you can see the water tower over here to the right, where it was, again, 160 yards from that water tower to that roof line. It doesn't appear to be that far to me. I think it's actually less. Because it looks the same distance to me from this stage to here. If you went from here to the top of that water tower, I bet it's closer to the 100 yards than it is 160 yards, right? So I think that's very interesting. And then I'm going to go ahead and share something else with you real quick. Let me pull, I knew I had dropped that real fast. So let me, I'm trying, hang in with me. I thought this was very interesting here. This was a whistleblower that came out today. Again, I apologize. Let me see if I can blow it up. So this was sent to Secretary Mayorkas, right? Who so far, I believe to date, has refused to testify. But this is a whistleblower who is coming out saying, this is the right. I was just reading it, making sure that it was the right one, right? So this was a whistleblower that tells Senator Josh Hawley that local law enforcement partners and suppliers actually offered drones to the Secret Service before the Trump rally, but Secret Service denied it. Like here's another thing that just, I mean, what are we, there are so many holes in this. I mean, it's like a piece of Swiss cheese, right? I mean, this is crazy. There's not, there's not logical answers for this. So let's just say that Secret Service showed up and forgot their drones, because they should have some, right? I would think Secret Service has some drones. They get $3.2 billion a year, right? And they got like 8,000 employees. So all their money is to spend on stuff, right? Cars, weapons, surveillance, right? That's what their money's for, right? And a little bit for the salary, right? So you mean to tell me that a company showed up the day before, or the day it just says before the Trump rally. It didn't specify the day of or whatever. But anyway, bottom line is it was before. So they offered to provide them drones, and the Secret Service said no. I've really tried to sit and come up with a logical explanation with that, and I seem to fail every time. We did have one senator that pointed out that if they left the window to go look for crooks, then why did both leave, right? And the answer to that from Paris was, I don't have that information yet. I would refer you to this, or I have to get there. I don't have the details of the report yet. So I'm wondering why two things. Like, one, why do we have these hearings if nobody's got the reports? Why do we have these hearings? Why don't we give these people 5 days, 7 days to get the reports? Well, we do. See, we didn't start this investigation until 10 days in, and no one is prepared. And Chettle, the Secret Service director, she got a 5-day warning or 5-day advance notice. This guy has had 10 days to know. Because surely, if something like this happens, they're going to get questioned by Congress, right? Or a special committee. Surely that's just common sense, right? We know what's coming. We know, well, I can't say. I have to be careful what I say on here, right? Because I'm still on YouTube, so I got to be careful, right? So Paris then says moving other things that came to town for the point moving forward, right? So he's saying from now on, they're going to decide where things go when this comes. Their officers will voice their concerns about things that they believe are not correct about the Secret Service plan in the future. Okay, my question is this. If you have a bunch of people there that are law enforcement, and you have trained sniper teams and SWAT and all these different people that are, trained in these areas, why didn't they say anything to begin with? See, this is something I've talked about before many times on TikTok and on shows that I've been on, is that there's a ranking system in everything for a reason. With the police, you have a ranking system. With the medical field, with the military, with the government, hell, even within corporations, they have this ranking system, right? Where do you on the pecking order? And the thing is, the reason so many bad things happen is because people on the bottom of the pecking order, if they just happen to open their mouth to the wrong person, that's it. That's it. Their whole career can be ruined. Everything can be flushed downtown or down the tube. They can lose everything they've worked for. So if they're in the medical profession, they can lose their license. If they're in the police, they could, and the problem is maybe not so much in the corporate world, but it is, but for sure in anything else, in police, fire, medical, military, all that. You can't say, okay, well, that happened here. I lived in Ohio, so I'm going to go to Florida and I'm just going to go to work there, because it's all of it's connected. So you have to wonder, why is it set up that way? Seems like it would be a lot easier to control outcomes, and it would be a lot easier to have people be quiet, because they would be afraid to lose what they have. Because if you have somebody that's gone to school for 4 years or 8 years or 12 years to get a degree, to get a license, and then they have a license that if they don't have, they can't do what they're doing. And then they've spent 8 years on the job and they've paid back their debt and they've got a certain way that they're living, and then they see something go wrong. Well, they can't really say anything because let's be honest, how many whistleblowers have we seen come out that we hear from them? They send out a letter like this one, and then we never hear another word about it again. Or we literally see people go after them for blowing the whistle, sue them, all kinds of stuff, right? That's the big one. So if they whistleblow about something about a company or whatever, that company will sue them for defamation and this and that, and they bury that person with an attorney where they can't even breathe and often lose everything that they have. So we have a society set up to make it where the people that want to say something about what's wrong often feel trapped in a situation where they can't open their mouth at all because of the fear of retaliation, right? So a senator asked Paris, did you notice that after they put him in the vehicle, talking about Trump, it pulled up about 20 feet and then it stopped for about 30 to 40 seconds as people walked in front of it, people walked behind of it. Some were regular looking people, some were police. And he said, didn't you think that was a long time for the former president to be sitting there, not moving? Right on the other side of those stands, right? So right in the line of fire still. After he just took a bullet. And Paris's response is, I defer that to the FBI. The question is, why would you defer that? He just said, don't you, Mr. Paris, Colonel Paris, find it that he was sitting there way too long, right? He was still in danger. So the thing for me is this constant deferring it to somebody else. The problem is we never get answers to these questions, because when he deferred it, if I was that senator, I would have said, that's not what I asked you. What I asked you, as in you as an individual, you with your 40 years law enforcement experience, you as the colonel of the Pennsylvania State Police, in your professional assessment, was the former president sitting there too long? And were too many people walking around the vehicle when we still at that point did not know if we had everybody contained? I defer that to the FBI. And the problem is nobody is drilling this on, they're letting them say this and they move on to the next question. See, I think that's where the problem lies with these hearings, is that we never get to the bottom of it, because there's constantly the ability to pass the buck to somebody, to some report that hasn't made it, to some person that's not there, to some entity that isn't there, and then when they interview them, they turn around and go, oh, I defer it back to them. So it just blows me away that this is happening. And these are the responses we're getting. And I'm not saying we're not getting answers to nothing, but we're not getting answers to a majority, right? Yes, local sniper team was stationed at the second story in that building. Who gave them permission to leave? I don't know. Who told them to go there? I don't know. Who told them that they could be inside the building instead of on top of the building? I don't know. Who told them that? I mean, this is, how is I don't know an acceptable answer in a congressional hearing on a almost successful attempt on a former president? But yet it is, because they move on to the next question. So I'm going to jump back to this picture real quick. Bear with me. Okay. Well, that may not be the right one. Sorry. I told you I'm not too good at this. The technical stuff, right? I'll get it down. Eventually, I'll just be doing it while I'm talking, but right now that ain't going to happen. All right. So if I am looking at this picture And I'm sorry, I just had to take a screenshot of this one because that's all I could get. So I can't really zoom it in, but where his hand is, there is an air conditioning unit. And then above his hand, that is a walkway from the building going into the second story building where the local sniper team was. And to the right of his hand, that building right there is where the shooter was. And then of course the picture to the right is the view from the window to the stage, which are those barns in the distance, right? So I guess where my confusion really comes in here is number one, we had a ladder story, then the ladder story disappeared, then they said he jumped on the AC unit and got up there. Well, if again, I apologize, you can't see this picture all the way, but if you look at the AC unit to the roof line of that building, I'm not sure how tall he was. Let's just say he was 5'9" average, right? So he would have basically had to jump up, hung on the roof, and pulled himself up, right? So he would have literally had to done a pull up with a rifle, I guess on his back. We don't know. And then push himself over the edge and then climb up on that roof. Now, I did see pictures of this guy, and just from a physical standpoint, I simply don't believe he would have been able to do that. Right? So we're still not sure how he got on here. And the other thing that's interesting is this tactical viewpoint. If you look at the right picture with the window, so that window, as you see that is open, you see a big line in that window, right? So that is the actual window when it's open. Well, that obstructs the ability for that sniper to do anything from where that window is to the right of that window. So why would you put a sniper team in a window to protect an asset that is obscured by the window itself? Again, another thing that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, right? No sense whatsoever. It's really interesting that if one of those officers would have stayed, one of those snipers of the team would have stayed, they would have had, as you can see to the building of the right of his hand, they would have had a 100% coverage on that roof, and they would have been able to take him out before he ever fired. And then they chose a place to begin with that was obstructed. It's just nothing is lining up about that, right? So the two officers that were hoisting themselves on the building were not the two that were on the ground that were the sniper team that were looking for him. So again, if they would have just stayed in their position, or at least one of them stayed in the position, they would have seen the officers trying to crawl up there, but they would have seen Crooks before that even happened, and they would have been able to eliminate the threat. So the other thing that's kind of striking me as very odd is and there's some other analysis of this. I'm gonna change this tab here. This is a CNN forensic report, right? So a forensic analysis of basically what happened on the ground, on the audio that day of this. So there are 3 different shot patterns and 3 different weapons that are analyzed, and there's the second page of it, that are analyzed that day. So I'm just gonna read it to you. Forensic analysts suggest that as many as 3 weapons were fired at the Trump rally in Butler, Pennsylvania on Saturday. The FBI said Sunday that the shooter acted alone. Now, we know from history, they always say they act alone, right? Lee Harvey Oswald, everybody acts alone until 20 years later and the truth comes out. The first 3 shots were consistent with alleged weapon A. And I believe that was the shooter. The next 5 shots were consistent with alleged weapon B. And the final acoustic impulse was emitted by a possible weapon C. I believe A was Crooks, B was the accomplice, and C was the sniper taking the final shot, which since has been relieved of his duty, which is also interesting. I haven't gotten a lot more than that, but he is not with the force anymore. So I don't know what and why, because they will not tell us. Per audio analysis by Caitlin Grigoris, director of the National Center for Media Forensics at the University of Colorado in Denver, and Cole White-Cotton, senior professional research associate at the same institution. So again, these are people with clear backgrounds and credentials that give them the right to be able to bring this information forward. Audio analysis has also confirmed that the gunman was about 360 to 393 feet from the podium, according to the forensics expert Robert Moore. So again, they're able to tell this stuff with sound, computing, all this stuff, right? And we've been told multiple times that the shooter was approximately 400 feet, right? And that's been approximate, so it's not been exact. The conclusion aligns with CNN's analysts that the gunman was on a rooftop 393 to 492 feet from the podium when the shots rang out. Now, I don't understand where they come up with a 99-foot gap. It would be very easy to take a tape wheel and measure from the podium to that building. So this whole 100 feet difference doesn't make any sense. The shot exemplify a crack pop sequence. Typically, when a supersonic bullet passes a microphone before the arrival of the corresponding muzzle blast sound, Marr, who teaches audio forensics at Montana State University, told CNN, oh, sorry, where'd it go? Told CNN the time between these markers places the shooter 110 to 120 meters from the microphone, Marr said. Assuming the bullet is moving at an average speed of 800 to 1,000 meters per second, the equivalent of 2,600 to 3,280 feet per second, which would be equivalent to a AR-15, right? So again, there's boom, 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 and then there's bah, 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 5 shots, and then boom, at the end, which was the one I believe took Crooks. The other thing that I thought very interesting, I apologize, I don't have the picture, but when you saw the aerial after his body's laying there, you notice that the rifle was several feet away from him, right? Now, somebody could have picked it up and moved it, but typically if they would have eliminated the threat, because it appears that he took one through either, I believe that he took it through the back because he's missing his 2 front teeth, appears to be missing his 2 front teeth. The blood is draining from what appears to be his ear down to his face, and then it's solid, and then it trails out, and then it's solid from the back top of his ear to his forehead, and then it spiders out into 3 deals, right? So that would indicate his face is laying down. The blood comes out of the back of the head down like this. Again, I'm no forensic expert. I'm looking at it from a common sense perspective. So if they would have taken him out, obviously that coming up on that, you wouldn't need to move the gun, right? You would know that he's no longer there. But again, the possibility that somebody could have moved the gun, right? So I think it's interesting. There's been multiple analysis. I've got another one that I'm really going over right now that's got a guy that's doing a fantastic job explaining it. So I'll probably be talking about that more, because when you put down these facts and the verbiage coming out of the people's mouth that were there and in charge do not align with the facts that are irrefutable, then you can't argue the facts. You have to argue what's coming out of somebody's mouth, right? So again, 11 days later, no after action report. This is something that's very baffling to me. I understand it takes time to compile data. It takes time to interview. It takes time to talk to people. But I would have to say, after a situation so critical like this, that it would be a pretty long day, probably a long night into the morning that night. But it should be go home, go get 8 hours sleep, because we're going to come back and we're going to be here for a day or two until we get everybody's deal. Maybe take another break for 8 to 10 hours and come back for 2 days, right? So you're talking about in a 5-day span, people have gotten 16 hours sleep, and you've gotten around the clock data from, or bring them in shifts, right? And get this data compiled. Being 11 days out from this and not having 80% of the answers, or I don't know, I don't have the final report, refer to the FBI, then the FBI says refer to the Secret Service, and the Secret Service says refer to the state police says refer to Secret Service. This doesn't, 11 days later, this is, to me, this is very inefficient, and also raises a lot of questions as to why is there so much time needed if we're trying to get the truth? If we're only trying to get the truth, you pull somebody aside, okay, what happened? You got a court reporter sitting there fast keying it. What happened? And they're just telling away, right? And then you bring in the next person. What did you see? Right? And then you compile all that data. Now, compiling the data may take a little time, but you would have it all. And now with AI, I'm sure Secret Service could compile that data immediately, or the government can in some form or facet in some department. But that doesn't happen. And then we have things happen, like we make the same comment 2 or 3 times during a 4-hour session, and then come back at 4-hour 20 mark and say, oh, let me re-clarify that. It wasn't 2.5 minutes to 3 minutes, it was seconds. It wasn't, we had 4 suspicious people, but let me make sure you understand, 3 out of the 4, it was all happening simultaneously and close to where Crooks was. I don't know. This seems interesting. That's all that took place. So what I did find interesting is Rep from Pennsylvania, Mr. Kelly. His bottom line was, he said he knew his initial concern was on July the 8th. He said that he thought when they initially told him Trump was coming, they were going to do it at Big Butler Fair. And they said that no, they were going to do it where they did. And he was like, whoa, that doesn't make any sense. There's going to be too many people there. Well, they said, oh, there's only going to be, 1,000 people there. And he was like, why in the world would you think that? He goes, we had a rally before with 55,000 people. And they were like, oh, well, he's not president anymore. And okay, so that's another thing that didn't make any sense. He's not the president anymore, but he's the front runner for the Republican Party coming up on an election that's a few months away. And he's been having crowds of anywhere from 20 to 30, 40, 50,000. And then all of a sudden you expect him to come to a battleground state where he's had 55,000 before, and now he's only going to come up with 1,000. Yeah, that again didn't make sense. We've seen many, many people talk about they just came in, jumped over fences, went through police tape, went in unprotected areas. People were coming into this thing from every angle. And that's because it was in a section that was not made to have it, right? Simply put. And then on top of that, there were over 50 buildings in a 500-yard radius around the stage. 50 buildings, right? So you have an area that's too small. You have all these people pouring in from all different directions. You have 50 rooftops, and the snipers let's just say they had 19 teams from local law enforcement. We still don't know where all of them were, because we haven't got the final report. They can't even answer that question. And then the Secret Service initially was not sending any sniper teams. And then they ended up sending 2 on the day of, with 50 buildings within a 500-yard radius. He said it was told to him, Mr. Kelly did, that it was already decided, but he couldn't get an answer on who decided it, right? He said that every person he's talked to in law enforcement is in charge of security has told them that they have done their job. They did their job that day. And he said, simply put, somebody did not do their job, obviously. We don't have the answers that we should have. He expressed his frustration with that. I think part of the things that I'm talking about. But the problem for me is he makes this statement, but he doesn't point out the list of those questions of what it is that he's not getting answered. So again, that's why sometimes I feel like these things are dog and pony shows, because if we're really trying to drill down and get an answer, wouldn't we say, this is what I want to know? Boom, 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 boom. This is my home state. We're going to be coming back here. We have to figure this out. You know, it was just kind of like, well, we don't have the answers, right? Police did not listen to people in the crowd. That was something he said, that he did say that one thing. He said, the one thing I cannot wrap my head around at the end is he said, you have people all over screaming at police, telling them there's somebody over there with a gun. There's somebody on that roof. There's somebody over there. And nobody went to investigate. The investigation was happening from people over in the area. None of the police on the perimeter area decided to go over there and see what all these people were trying to warn them about. Basically just gaslighting them. Like, there ain't nobody over there. What are you talking about? So I think there's going to be a lot to uncover that is going to still come out, or there's not. And what my fear is often, like happens with many other congressional hearings, is we have these things that come up, we get these meetings going with these high-ranking officials, and this even happens with the big courts, with the big pharma, with the tech, with all of them. We have these congressional hearings, and they rip these people apart. Jim Jordan gets a hold of them, and MTG gets a hold of them, and all these, and Matt Gaetz, and it looks good. It does. It kind of fires you up, right? But then often the answers from these people are, I don't know, I don't have the report, refer to somebody else, I don't know. And somehow that ends up being good enough. And what I think is very interesting is if you get in trouble and you go to court, right? And you're asked questions and you just keep saying, I don't know, a judge is going to threaten to put you in jail if you don't answer the questions, right? Because he's going to go, well, you're guilty then, right? But somehow in a congressional hearing, when a man's life was at stake, the public's safety, public's trust in government to keep us and high-ranking figures safe is diminishing by the minute, then somebody can get away with saying, I don't know, I don't have the information, I don't have the report. And Cheadle, who said out of her own mouth she wanted to take full responsibility for the worst day in Secret Service history in decades, I believe she was referring to JFK, then resigns and gets a $50,000 pension for the rest of her life. Now, is she still going to be held accountable? I don't know. It'd be really interesting to see if she just gets to fade off, right? If she just gets to fade away, we don't hear much of anything. But some new person comes in as the spokesperson for the Secret Service and starts answering the questions like, well, I'm here now and I'm going to answer the questions. And she just fades off. So it's still very, very early to tell what's going to happen, but I can tell you that it's very, very, very interesting that some of these very basic questions are not getting answered. Some of these very basic mistakes that were made by some of the best of the best. Because I can assure you, you know, when they bring the Secret Service, that's the best of the best, right? You bring in the state police, brought in their 30 guys. Do you think they picked the 30 rookies to do that? Or do you think they picked the good guys, right? Or the top guys? Same thing for the police. And what's really the deal is if you're a police officer or state police officer or even Secret Service agent that day and you know things are wrong and you don't speak up, and you don't bring it to the forefront, because could you imagine if 5 or 6 state police and 5 or 6 local police and 2 or 3 agents all came together and said, man, this is what happened. This is what we believe happened. This is what, you know, could they get rid of all of them? Could they, you know, make all of them's life so much hell they disappeared? The sad answer to that is more than likely yes. Yes. They would get temporarily suspended, and then I'm sure that they would come up with some reason to terminate them. So I don't know until the system breaks so that we can restructure it in a way that it rewards the people that come forward that want to do right, want to see right done, instead of crucify them. then unfortunately, I think the evil power will continue to rise and the evilness will continue to haunt us until people that really care have a voice big enough that shadows that. So I look forward to seeing you guys on Tuesday. Again, I may be covering more of this hearing. If not, I am going to be covering J.D. Vance's ties to Peter Thiel, Next Gen 911, and other surveillance state information. So I hope to see you then. Maybe I'll have one of those cool, fancy opening videos, and hopefully I know how to click on these pages a little bit better. Y'all have a great night.